Welcome to the New York State Assembly District 8 candidate debate. Today is Monday, October 19th, and our candidates are Mike Fitzpatrick and Dylan Rice. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. We're nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Each year, we publish a directory of public officials for Suffolk County. The winner of this election will be listed in it, as we always do. Vote 411 is a National League of Women Voters voter information site. People put in their address. It matches to their election district, and they will be able to see everyone and everything that's going to be on their ballot. The candidates have all agreed that they would have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements. They'll also be asked the same question on a rotating basis. Each candidate with these questions will be allowed 2 minutes to respond and permitted up to 1 minute as a rebuttal or additional answer. As with every league debate, education and civility are our debate goals. Voters should be able to learn about why each candidate deserves supports, so personal attacks are discouraged. And our questions were prepared in advance to permit a range of relevant issues to be discussed. And in colloquial terms, I'm the boss. The moderator is the final arbiter of any disagreement. So at that point, we are done with our intro. And that's it. All right, so the first person, to do their opening statement will be Dylan Rice.
All right, I can just start?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, hello everyone. My name is Dylan Rice. I'm running for the Democratic ticket in Assembly District 8. And I'd just like to thank the League for hosting this and for the work you continue to do, safeguarding our democracy and providing information to folks that are going to vote. The reason I decided to run is because the middle class and working families are being left behind. I grew up in my district, I worked in my district, I went to school in my district, and I still live in my district. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to live in my district. New York continues to work for the ultra wealthy and special interest, and Assembly seems, and Albany seems to be doing the same, especially with the elected representatives we have up there now representing Long Island. I want to stand out in contrast. I ran a grassroots campaign that refused corporate donations and donations from the ultra wealthy, and instead I decided to fight for the folks I grew up with and the folks I work with. I want to bring back bread and butter wins from Albany. Right now, New York City controls Albany. The Democratic majority there basically dictates where tax money goes. Long Island pays a lot of that tax money, and I think it's time we got some of those results back. I want to make sure we have a seat at the table that my opponent has not been able to provide. His voice continues to shrink in Albany as Democrats win more and more. The GOP has made it clear that they'd rather stand on ideological issues rather than bread and butter issues that help working class and middle class families. And I want to make sure that we do have that seat at the table and enough to get the issues that we have locally, statewide, the attention that they need and deserve. I'm not there to focus on bipartisan politics. I'm there to focus on bipartisan politics, not ideological battles. I'm not there to spar. I'm there to make sure our district is winning, and I'm bringing back key wins for the folks that live here. And I'm proud to be running as a first-time candidate. I want to make sure that everyone here has the same opportunity that I have had to grow, to work, and to live here, and to make sure that it extends to the folks getting right involved in this democratic system for the first time and the folks who live there their entire life. And that's why I'm proud to be running to represent my district.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rice. And Mike Fitzpatrick, your opening statement, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the League for giving us this opportunity to share our views and our aspirations with the voters of Smithtown and Islip. I'm very much looking forward to going back to Albany in January in what I believe is a very interesting and unprecedented environment. I have had the pleasure of serving the people of the town of Smithtown and Islip in the Assembly for 9 terms. And before that, I had the pleasure of serving the people of Smithtown on the town council. That experience has been invaluable up in Albany as we try our very best to keep New York competitive. As my opponent just mentioned, New York City controls the state legislature, and he is in that party. And we have a very serious problem with the leftward socialist drift in the Democratic Party in New York State. New York State, unfortunately, is one of the least competitive states from a tax and business climate perspective, and that is in large part because of the one-party rule we have in Albany. So I look forward to having a discussion about the issues. If Albany is not working for the people of Long Island, it is because of the policies of the radical left of the Democratic Party in Albany. We need to elect more Republicans to the state assembly, and I think this year we have a very good opportunity to do that, to bring balance back to the state legislature. One of the great arguments for electing more Republicans in the state assembly, quite frankly, came from the Democratic leader of the second largest Democratic organization in the country in Brooklyn a few years ago, Mr. Vito Lopez, when he said things were better here, meaning the assembly, when there were fewer of us, meaning Democrats, and more of you, meaning Republicans. So making the assembly more purple is in the best interest of the taxpayers of New York State. But if look forward to the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fitzpatrick. And yes, for both of you, please, when you see the stop sign, do that. Finish your phrase and make a note, because you'll have 2 minutes at the end. So as you come up with things that you had wanted to add, by all means, drive your point home at the end as well. So again, we have a bunch of questions we've made up. They're on a range of topics. I think you will have quite often quite different points of view on the questions. So we will start this time with Mr. Fitzpatrick, because we're going to be flipping back and forth. So since Mr. Rice did the opening first, you get the first question, and you'll both be able to answer it in 2 minutes. If elected, what is the most important issue that you would address immediately that would benefit your constituents?
Lisa, the most important thing we need to do is, it's really two things, but they're one, and that is getting COVID under control once the vaccine and the therapies are available, and in tandem, moving toward opening our economy up as much as possible, as quickly as possible, so that we can get every level of government functioning at the level we had before COVID. So getting the vaccine out, which I think is coming soon, and once that happens, getting our economy up and going. We cannot run an economy in New York State at 25% and expect to meet the needs of our constituents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rice, same question?
Yeah, COVID is obviously the paramount issue right now, because without fixing COVID, we really can't fix a lot of the other issues. But COVID highlighted a lot of the issues within New York, and it just kind of pointed that out a little bit more clearly, including income inequality, wealth inequality that ranges across the state. We have to be smart about COVID. I know the term was used, it's coming soon, but realistically, we're not going to get a vaccine until maybe spring 2021. We have to act as we can now. We have to be safe with what we know now. We have to be smart in how we reopen, because yes, I do agree, businesses need to reopen. We need to get the economy moving along again, but I'm not willing to put people's lives at risk to do so to make the stock market happy. I want to make sure working and middle-class people are taken care of, and New York State bears the responsibility, when they told businesses to close, when they told people to stay home, to make sure that they're made whole. You can't tell them to stay home and then not provide them the assistance that they need. You can't close businesses and then not help them to reopen. So New York has to take a much stronger approach and fix the issues that stem from the federal government's initial lack of response to the COVID pandemic. We did pretty well holding it together. We're doing better than a lot of states in the union, but a second wave is on the way. If you thought the first wave was bad, the second wave is going to be a lot worse unless we can really keep this under control. We need to think with science-based policy, rational policy, common sense policy that, one, protects our economy and the middle class, and also keeps us healthy and safe. If everybody gets sick again, there's no economy. It will collapse even worse than it did the first time. We have to be smart and safe.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you want to respond in any way?
Well, what Dylan says is not wrong, but what we cannot allow happen is that the cure becomes worse than COVID itself. We have some very real problems with our children not being able to go back to school 5 days a week. That is hurting healthcare. It's affecting parents' ability to get back to work and get our economy going again. I think the response at the federal and the state level has been good on both levels, because we are dealing with what's known as a novel coronavirus. We've never experienced this before. So Monday morning quarterbacking is always, hindsight is always 20/20. There were some mistakes made in preparing for this and executing, but a lot of good things have happened as well. And I think on balance, both the federal government and the state government has done a good job. But we have to do what we have to do now, now that we know more today than we did 7-8 months ago, is we've got to get moving. We can't live in fear of this virus. We have to get the economy going again.
Okay, Mr. Rice, sure.
I think Monday morning quarterbacking usually refers to when the game takes place on Sunday, but in this case, the coronavirus was known about for about 3 months, and the federal government did about nothing to prepare for it, including disbanding Obama's pandemic response team that was in place in China. So just that first. And also, yes, initially it went chaotic, but right now the states that are doing the best are Democratic run states. They took the proper precaution. They made sure they looked at the signs, with a few exceptions, including Ohio, as a Republican governor who did a great job. But when you're looking at the states that are doing bad, including a lot of the ones down south, what did they do? They said, rush to reopen, get everybody out there, and the death rates and the sickness rates are staggering. They're going up, up, up. We need to make sure we do this in a safe and productive manner. There is ways to do it safely, but we all have to self-sacrifice. We all have to make sure we're looking out for each other and doing the right thing. We can protect our economy and our health because they're interconnected. If we all get sick again, there is no economy. We have to do this in a safe manner.
Okay, thank you both on that. The next question, Mr. Rice, you're up anyway, and it's yours. Moonlighting by top legislative leaders and top members of the executive branch has triggered indictments by federal prosecutors. Would you support prohibiting outside income for members of the legislature in excess of 15% of gross annual salary?
100% unequivocally. Public service in this type of regard requires no conflicts of interest. If you're in the legislature and you're writing laws, you cannot be working a job where you have a conflicting interest. I know, Mr. Fitzpatrick, you were once a banker. I know that has stopped due to specifically these type of indictments, and I'm happy you're doing that. But this should have always been the case. You can't be working for the people and working for another person. Render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. You have to be doing what you're doing as a public worker and make sure you're serving the public. If you have a conflict of interest that threatens legislation that's going to help working people, you can't have a secondary job. And that does mean we have to make sure, like any type of public servant, is being paid a satisfactory wage to make sure that they can do so. And right now we do need to focus specifically on politicians, because money in politics is what corrupts it. That's the #1 issue in politics right now. Money dictates what is done and what is written in the laws that are made. We need to make sure that there's no outside influence with politicians. They represent their folks that they represent, their constituents, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Well, the issue of outside income, in the early days, if you go back to, say, 1776, we were a citizen legislature in all of the colonies and in our states, even the federal government. You conducted your government business and you went back to your line of work, whether you were a shopkeeper, farmer, whatever. One of the strengths I believe in that we have in the state legislature is we have people who have come from different backgrounds. We have many attorneys. We have funeral directors. We have dentists. We have nurses. I was a financial advisor for 16 years. When you have diversity of background, you bring different perspectives and expertise to a number of issues. If you have everybody as a full-time legislator, you basically get nothing but full-time political hacks. And that is a real problem, especially when you're making $110,000 with a defined benefit pension. I advocate and have carried legislation since I got to Albany to eliminate the defined benefit pension for all elected officials from governor down to the local level, because separating, putting the elected official on the same side as the taxpayer is what's critical right now. But we don't have that. So I believe there's nothing wrong with having outside income. If you want to put limits on it, fine. But creating a full-time legislature really, I believe, will do a disservice to the people of New York State, because you will have people who will bring nothing to the table except politics. And that's not a good thing.
Okay, Mr. Rice, another comment on that?
Yeah, just the rebuttal. In my case, if I was elected and I got to serve as the assemblyman, my entire time would be dedicated to spending every time that I could have been spent working another job, talking to my constituents, making sure that I was hearing what they needed to hear. I understand the fear of maybe political hackery, but that's where the voters come in to get them out. If I'm elected and I'm not doing that every single day, talking to my constituents, I want an open office. I want people to come in every single day to talk to me. If I can be safe with my income, which is a six-figure salary, something that a lot of folks, especially my age, can't make. If I'm getting that working as a public servant and I get to talk to my constituents and not have to worry about another job, I'm going to take that every day of the week.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, yes.
Well, if we're going to get away from the concept of a citizen legislature where we have people who, if we're going to make politics a full-time business, and some people, that's fine if you believe that. But there's nothing wrong with having people who bring a different perspective and who can handle additional duties and bring that perspective to the table. It's invaluable. I know that my expertise in pensions and in financial services, the stock market, has been very helpful. It helps me understand. I can also help other members of the legislature understand issues. We ask each other questions when they come from different backgrounds when we're dealing with those types of issues. One of the problem with the indictments comes more from the problems with some of the government funds that are distributed through these nonprofit agencies that many members of the legislature, almost all of them Democrat, by the way, from New York City, get into big trouble when they start hiring their friends and abusing that system.
Okay, sounds like you both want to add something at the end then on this. Okay, Mr. Rice, you get the next one. Do you support an independent redistricting process that takes legislators out of the process of drawing the district lines and allows citizen input and transparency and accountability in the map-making process?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things you learn about and you go, oh, gerrymandering is still a thing, even though it's 2020. Yes, it is. And I do support an independent redistricting process. We need to make it as transparent as possible. We need to make it as fair as possible. If that means a Republican wins the seat because it's fair, that's fair. If that means a Democrat wins the seat because it's fair, that's fair. I don't like the idea of politicians, again, to dictate how long they get to keep their seat because they can draw a nice little squiggle. That's not fair. We need to make it as openly transparent as possible, as fair as possible, and not use census information to basically enable one party to maintain control across the board. Democrat, Republican cannot happen. It just has to be a fair process. And the best way to make it a fair process is to get the folks who could benefit most out of it out of the process.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, technology today, the computer software allows majorities to pick their voters rather than voters to pick their elected officials. There's nothing wrong with an independent a panel of the sort. It's who gets to pick the members. I know the state of Indiana has a very successful commission like this that serves as a model. But one of the problems we have in this state with commissions is usually the governor wants to pick, the majority of those members. He wants a majority on that board. So if it is fair, if it operates similar to the way we run our boards of elections, where it's a 50-50 split, or each party gets a seat at the table. We do have more than two parties, but when you have fairness, but it's very difficult, frankly, Lisa, to take politics out of politics, which is what you're trying to do here. It's a valiant effort. I don't know if it can succeed, but if we can make it a little more fair, I'm certainly in favor of that, because the current system, frankly, has hurt Long Island a lot. Because of the growth of the city. City districts happen to be a little smaller than suburban districts. Why? Because the majority makes them a little smaller for themselves, so they need more members. So that gives them the numerical advantage. It's a very unfair system. And there's criticism of the Republicans on the Senate side over the years. There was a non-compete agreement between the two houses. All right, we'll draw the Senate lines, you draw the Assembly lines. The minorities in each house would complain that the majority in the other house wasn't helping them at all. So yeah, the system does stink, and the gerrymandering has gone on for years. And it's one of the reasons you end up with one party rule, and it's not a good thing for the state of New York. So it's how or who gets to serve on this panel. If you allow the governor to pick a majority of the members, then I don't think it's going to help.
Okay, Mr. Rice, you want to comment further on that? No.
I think we agree for the most part. Yeah, just practice.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, good?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. All right, so moving on, Mr. Fitzpatrick, this one's yours. Where do you stand on current efforts to address racism in healthcare, housing, education, and policing policies? What are your proposals to address or combat racism at this time for Long Island?
Very interesting question. You know, I live by a very simple creed, Lisa. I believe you treat people the way you want to be treated. That's how I was brought up. And I have always been, you know, very open-minded when it comes to treating people who are different from me. You know, it's funny, I went away to college back in the mid-70s, you know, coming from Long Island, an area that was not as diverse as it is today. And I was asked to sign up to take in a foreign roommate. And I thought, gee, that sounds like a lot of fun. So I had foreign roommates, Latin America, Haiti, all 4 years in college. And it was a life-changing experience. I ended up meeting my wife in college. You know, my wife is brown. She's from Mexico. We were married in Mexico. She spoke no English when we met. Luckily, my Spanish was pretty good and remains so. So I think, you know, dealing with race is dealing with human beings. And I treat people who, whatever they look like, the same. Unfortunately, not everybody else has done that. And we've had problems with race in this country. But I think here on Long Island, you know, we are moving. Long Island is becoming more diverse, which is a good thing. And, you know, we have passed many laws to combat the problem of racism. I don't believe we're a bad people or a racist society. We have bad elements. Every society does, but I do not believe Smithtown or Islip are filled with racists, and I would reject any categorization as such. You know, we're always working to improve ourselves and improve society. We've done that, I think.
Okay.
I'll stop.
We may do more on the rebuttal on this one because I may do a small follow-up too.
Sure.
Mr. Rice, same question.
I was raised the same way, to treat others the way I was treated. And thankfully, usually this isn't a person-to-person type issue. Of course, there's people that are vehemently racist, just people that are vehemently anti-racist. But what we're talking about is a societal problem, and it's ingrained in our society, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. I've always said to people, the reason we're the greatest country in the world is because of what our potential is. We're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving. But we can't deny reality, and we can't deny history. There is racism ingrained in a lot of our society. Multiple health institutions, including, I think, quite recently, Northwell Health, said that racism is a public pandemic. It's a societal problem. It is ingrained in our society, and it's a health crisis. That goes to healthcare, as you mentioned, specifically racism in healthcare. The Black maternity death rate is much higher than white maternity death rate. Things like that are real and tangible. It's not just an abstract idea. Racism impacts lives. And so when we talk about it, we can't just say platitudes of, you know, I hope everybody can get along. We kind of, you know, we can just keep saying that and nothing's going to change. It does involve laws in changing them. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, your voting record has time and time again denied the route in which we can address these things societally, whether it means voting against prohibits police officers from racial and ethnic discrimination. Stuff like that perpetuates racism in society. Things like against common sense reform, like legalizing and taxing and regulating marijuana. Those type of things lower crime. They attack Mexican cartels who make it a killing off it. But also the war on drugs was always a racist war. It put thousands of Black people in jail, and it has helped perpetuate racism within our society. We need to vote. It's an institutional thing. I can say as many times as I want, people, please be nice. But at the end of the day, it ain't the people. It's the society we're in. It's the laws that provide it. And that's what causes this to continue to fester and grow. And we need to address it directly. There is nothing wrong with saying racism still exists in our society, What is wrong is not doing anything about it.
Okay, thank you.
There
Actually, before,
is, you know,
yeah,
there's, sure, there are elements of racism in the society, but to paint with a broad brush and say, you know, we're a racist society. You know, there are people out there who are, you know, race baiters. There are people out there who profit off, you know, racial division. You know, we know who they are as well. I don't need to mention any names. We know who they are, and they've been, you know, they've made a good living doing that. But, you know, I look at someone like the famous actor Morgan Freeman, who says, you know, Black history is American history. And, you know, in a discussion he had with one of the TV talking heads, he said, you know, why don't we stop? You stop calling me Black, and I'll stop calling you white. All right. And that's what we have to do. So we have, you know, yeah, legislature's been passed. And let me tell you something, Dylan, you know, my voting record, I'm proud of my voting record on that. What you don't understand as, you know, the young person you are running for the very first time, there's a lot of nuance in a lot of these bills. And just because a bill says it does something, when you get into the nitty-gritty of some of this legislation, it doesn't do what it intends to do. In fact, sometimes it goes far afield from what it wants to do. I call them the Widows and Orphan Protection Act bills. How can you vote against widows and orphans? Well, you read the bill and you find out, you know, a label, you know, doesn't tell you exactly what the ingredients are.
Mr. Rice?
I know you mentioned the Morgan Freeman conversation. I wish a Black man had the right to say, can you treat me as a white man to a judge when they're getting higher sentences across the nation? I wish we could just erase race whenever it was convenient. That's not how it works. The system,
Dylan, your
did
presidential candidate wrote the
All right.
crime bill, by the way.
Oh,
Okay.
we're running for state assembly, just friendly reminder, but yes. So we're talking about racism as a real tangible thing. It cannot be erased with a wand. And I know the president, at least in your party, if we're going to trade barbs, is trying to erase history by pretending slavery didn't exist. So we can continue with that if we want to do that.
We're running for the state assembly, right?
Thank you. Even barbs. Okay, we're good. We need to focus on things that are real, tangible issues. Racism is ingrained in our society. That does not mean American society as a whole is racist, but it has found pockets to exist in, to ferment in, and to grow in. And it continues to hurt disproportionately people of color. There is nothing wrong with acknowledging that. It is not anti-American to say that. One of the most American people in the world, Martin Luther King Jr., celebrated across the board, acknowledged that the white moderate is the biggest threat to civil justice in the United States because of the folks that go, I'm going to ignore this problem, I'm going to let it grow. I can just kind of to be forceful and remove these pockets of racism that still exist in our society and really achieve that perfect union that we've been talking so much about for years.
I want to add something to this particular discussion and each take a minute on that too. And we did mention in the question healthcare, but I want to talk about housing for a minute, simply because you both, I'm sure, are very familiar with the Newsday study about realtors and what amounts to still almost redlining. And I think we all agree that realtors are the salt of the earth. We all, you know, they're the people that come out to support the chamber, to support the fundraising or whatever. Yet these good people are somehow, through whatever reason, ending up steering people so they end up being shown houses in areas that, quote, they would be more comfortable in. So Mike, you first, and then Dylan. Linda, I'd like to give them each one more minute just to address that, or if you want to just a little bit of that and pursue the general discussion on racism you were just having, and then we'll move on to another subject. So Mike?
Well, maybe, Lisa, this is one of those little pockets that Dylan is referring to. So if you have a problem in a particular industry or in a particular segment of society, you can address that aggressively. Newsday, you know, did some very interesting reporting on that, brought it to light. I don't think it means all of Long Island is racist. I reject that categorically. And it's being addressed and perhaps will be addressed in the next legislature with certain laws passed to, you know, to address any kind of egregious behavior like that. You know, when I first got married, I had a real estate license, and I was in an office in Central Islip, which we know is a very diverse community. Wonderful people, wonderful people. I really enjoyed my time there. But this is not a this is a specific issue that has been identified and will be addressed. And again, if people treated people the way they wanted to be treated, this never would have happened, unfortunately. But human beings, and there are some bad ones out there.
Mr. Rice?
And when I said little pockets, I did say they ferment and grow. So this is the perfect example. You say if only people treat each other the way they want to be treated. There was money in not doing that. There was money in perpetuating racist mentality to make sure that real estate got a big buck. They kept cities and towns segregated because they could, prevent blockbusting, and they basically continuated redlining. It's Jim Crow under another name. It's the same stuff that's been perpetuating and perpetuating and perpetuating. And we can't be in a situation where a publication has to find this out, expose it, and then the legislature gets on top of it. We need to make sure that we're actively addressing this stuff as it comes about, as we learn about it, and always keeping an eye out. The Supreme Court, basically throughout parts of the Voting Rights Act, under the claim that racism had ended in the United States. Racism has not ended. It is getting better at hiding itself. And as it continues to grow and reemerge, we need to be ready to basically play whack-a-mole, hit it down, and address it.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to the next topic. And Mr. Rice, this is yours. What methods would you propose to improve healthcare coverage for New Yorkers? And what is your position on the New York State Health Act, legislation introduced in both the Senate and Assembly, which states it will provide comprehensive universal health coverage for every New Yorker? Just 2 minutes.
COVID-19 has illustrated once and for all that the way America approaches healthcare is a failed way to approach healthcare. People are going bankrupt because they're trying to survive. I believe that healthcare is a human right and a public good, something that the taxpayers need to have a hand in and transparency through. The New York Health Act, which is estimated to save a conservative amount of over $10 billion for New York State taxpayers. I know the talking points are going to come in, they're going to pay higher taxes, yada, yada. You are saving more money. You're paying this tax. You don't have to pay copays. You don't have to pay premiums. The insurance companies don't get to deny you money and make a profit. Deny you healthcare and make a profit. They get rich when they deny people healthcare. The New York Health Act is going to provide elder care, mental care, healthcare to New Yorkers because they're New Yorkers and they're taxpayers. I always believe that the social contract between the government and its citizens included welfare, which includes healthcare. It is pivotal that healthcare is no longer treated as a market good where if you're not wealthy enough, too bad. Too bad. You don't get to live. You don't get to get the help you need. This pandemic has illustrated how dangerous that mentality is when there are people who are too afraid to get tested because they cannot afford to get treated. The New York Health Act is a common sense step in the right direction. I'm hoping we can illustrate to the great rest of the union here that this should be a federal thing. This is New York State shouldn't have to do this ourselves, but we're going to do it. We're going to lead by example. We're going to show the rest of the country how to do it because that's what New York tends to do historically, at least. And then they're going to catch up to the plate. But we need to be the front runners in this. We need to show them this is how we should approach healthcare. This is going to benefit the middle class and working class families. This is the way to go.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Well, I strongly oppose the New York Health Act because it's socialized medicine, and that is a cure that will kill the patient and not help them at all. Healthcare, Saul Alinsky has 8 steps to topple a nation and create a socialist state. Number 1 is healthcare. Control healthcare, you control the people. This has long been the number 1 agenda item for the radical left of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialists of America, who endorsed my opponent, by the way. This is a bad idea. Socialized medicine doesn't work. You have to ration it. It's expensive. You politicize healthcare now when government controls it. And we're talking about roughly 6% or so of the population that is uninsured right now. All right, so that should be the main focus, is getting people covered. Obamacare was really just a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was designed ultimately to lead to socialized medicine. It is not as described by my opponent as a conservative approach. That's absolute nonsense. There was a good book on economics that I read by a Financial Times economics writer called The Undercover Economist. And being a Brit, he's very familiar with the National Health Service in Britain. And when you have a system that has unlimited wants, because everyone is going to want the best healthcare, but you have a limited budget, all right, you can't afford everything. So decisions have to be made. And you look at how decisions are made in Great Britain, which is probably the best socialized medical system out there, but it never has enough money. And God forbid, you get seriously sick, say with a cancer diagnosis, you will have to wait weeks, if not months, to get testing. That's not going to be acceptable here in the United States. This is, okay.
Okay, we'll come back. Mr. Rice.
One of the reasons that the NHS doesn't have enough funding is because conservatives continue to defund it, first and foremost. Two, if you brought a receipt for an ambulance bill to England, they would literally laugh you out of the pub. They go, you pay to survive? That's crazy. Any claim that he just made about healthcare and the public good is wrong. He's basically saying, I want the folks who deny you healthcare to make a good profit. I want you to be able to have to pay out of pocket to survive. Healthcare is something that is non-negotiable. It cannot be something that requires wealth. It is necessary. A healthy country, a healthy populace means a good economy. It will pay for itself 100-fold. Removing this burden on middle class and working families expands their ability to build up the economy. Healthcare cannot be something you deny for a profit. That is how the system works right now. Every single one of the European countries that utilizes a public healthcare method, guarantee you they're doing a lot better than anybody in America is right now. The healthcare is high quality. It's affordable because, again, it is a public good. They're not going broke because they want to be able to survive. That's what we're dealing with in the United States. And conservative attacks on Obamacare are going to take millions that are covered by currently by pre-existing conditions. They want to knock them off too. It's only going to get worse.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, it's utter nonsense. This is there is no human being in the United States that if they require health care, they can walk into any emergency room and be taken care of. All right, the system, the system as politicized as it already is, and we do have, the VA in a sense is a form of socialized medicine. We have a Medicare, Medicaid system. We have multiple systems at work here, but a purely socialized form of medicine will create a very uncompetitive economy. The taxes will go through the roof. The rationing, what people don't understand is the rationing that occurs because you cannot afford to provide all the health care everybody wants. Rationing is a part of the deal. And that's what my opponent doesn't want to talk about. So when you have a system, the system needs repair. It doesn't need to be scrapped and started over, and especially a socialized healthcare system. It is un-American. It will take away your freedom. We were told once by the Obama administration that if we liked our doctor, we could keep it. That was a lie. Socialized medicine is a lie. Mr.
Rice?
Oh, I thought we exhausted rebuttal.
Oh, yeah. You went first. No, we're not going for.
We can talk about it forever, but
Yeah, well, what I think is important to the people viewing this debate, of which I hope there will be many hundreds, is that there are things you folks agree on, and there are things that you have very distinct positions on. And what's important to us as the League is that you have the opportunity to explain why you're taking those positions. So, okay, so Mr. Fitzpatrick, what are your fiscal plans? Not for tonight, but what are your fiscal plans if the federal government does not subsidize or fund New York State's budget?
Well, we'll get something. I think the president very prudently put this off until after the election because the process became extremely politicized. We will get some assistance. But what the federal government is not going to do for New York is we had a $6 to $7 billion deficit going into the COVID crisis. So we were not managing, the state was in a fiscal crisis before COVID started. Any bailout should cover COVID related expenses only. The federal government should not be bailing out states like New York, California, Illinois, and others for their pre-COVID failures. What we have to do is get serious about the cost side of the ledger. And that is something government generally doesn't do well, and something New York State has never done well. But we're going to have to. And this is what Governor Cuomo doesn't want to address. The governor is playing a game of fiscal chicken here, and he's waiting. He's hoping for a Biden victory and a Senate takeover by the Democrats that will come in and bail him out and give people like my children and grandchildren and people like Dylan more debt to pay to the Chinese, because they're the only ones that are going to come in and buy this debt. So it is a very dangerous game that I think the governor is playing, because he doesn't want to get real about, looking at the cost drivers that are driving up the tax burden and making New York very uncompetitive. All right. And why is that? Because, the public employee unions, because most of the money is going into the salary and benefits and the unaffordable provisions of some of these contracts that need to be adjusted to conform with this new reality. And if we do not do this, we will continue to add additional tax burdens, and you're going to see more people flee New York State, more businesses close and leave New York State. In fact, I'm done.
Wait for the rebuttal. Mr. Rice, your answer?
Yeah, I hate the idea that New York has to wait for the, guiding hand of the federal government to take care of ourselves. I don't think that should be the case. New York State has to take control of the situation directly. We need to start investing in communities, making sure we're providing job opportunities for the middle class, investing in new infrastructure and green energy. And that's going to help boost the economy. It's going to take an investment, but we're going to get it back. That's how FDR did it. None of these ideas are radical. I know we're throwing the word socialist around like a baseball. Regardless, FDR, when the Great Depression happened, and depending on how bad COVID goes, economic collapse could happen to a degree similar. It's already getting close. It could get worse. It wasn't scrimp and save, cut services for the middle class and working class, attack pensions, take away from the workers. It was, no, we're going to invest in them. We're going to build them up, because the only way the economy comes back is when the middle class and working people are powerful. They got to have a big pocketbook, because they're the ones that spend it. Right now, New York State caters to the ultra wealthy. It says, we're not going to tax your ultra luxury condo in New York City, because I don't want to ruffle your feathers, because they control politics, because they donate to politicians. We need to make sure they're paying their fair share. This isn't a punishment for being rich. This is, you've avoided paying your fair share for this long. Stop putting the burden on working families in the middle class. You have to pay your fair share and help it balance out. And we need to invest in these communities. Again, we need to provide these high paying jobs. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in New York regarding infrastructure. I got like 18 potholes on my street. We got to make sure we're getting this kind of work done, providing the jobs necessary, and expanding the labor rights and power of the middle class and working class, because when they're strong, this debt is going to slowly erase itself, because the New York economy is going to boom like it's never boomed before.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick, rebuttal?
Well, I've enjoyed these discussions with Dylan, because Dylan constantly reminds me of Friedrich Hayek's famous quote that if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. The New York worker, the unionized worker in New York, especially in the public sector, is already extremely strong in New York State, Dylan. And the taxation, what you seem to fail to understand is that the capital and labor are mobile, and we are losing not only successful people to states with a lower tax burden. You're going to have to convince the governor, because the governor understands this, and he's reluctant to continue to raise taxes. We have one of the second highest combined tax rate in the country after California. So raising taxes, we see record numbers of people leaving New York, but we're also seeing a record number of Americans giving up their citizenship for tax reasons, because they know what's coming. If the Democratic Socialists of America, the AOCs and the Dylan Rices of the world control the Congress and the legislatures, you're going to see prohibitive taxation and a collapsing economy.
Okay, Mr. Rice?
I said this before, I am not a socialist. I do not identify as socialist. I am not wearing a red flag, nor is there a red flag behind me. Nothing.
You're DSA endorsed.
Like I said, the DSA is equivalent to FDR in politics. We can try red scare tactics again. We can try red scare tactics
AOC,
again.
not FDR.
McCarthy is no longer here. Let's focus on the important issues, bread and butter issues with the United States and New York State and Long Island and District 8. What I'm talking about right now, you mentioned unions. Oh, they're already powerful. 23% of the workforce in New York State is unionized. That needs to be 100%. The middle class needs to unionize. They need to have power with labor. CEOs get paid 231 times more than the average worker in the United States. 231 times more. They are not getting taxed at the rate they need to be. They build the loopholes. They work with the politicians who draft the loopholes. They have not paid their fair share. If they want to renounce their citizenship because they got to pay their fair share, I don't want them in this country. If they want to give up the United States because of that, good riddance. Bye. The people that are fleeing are me, because I can't afford to live here because the burden of the economy is placed on me and I'm seeing none of the benefits. Folks my age, the middle class, working class, we're being left behind in New York, which continues to be socialist for the rich, providing every opportunity to make sure they're doing good, they're doing well, they're subsidized, while leaving me, working class people, and the middle class behind.
Okay, we have a related question. So Mr. Rice, this is yours. Discuss how New York State can protect our workers' jobs as a result of the pandemic. For example, infrastructure is a potential economic boost, and the construction industry is a major employer for our region. But what is your position on requiring New York State and municipal projects be contracted to only New York State companies?
Yeah, we need to focus. And again, this kind of ties into, we're representing New York State. We want to make sure New York State is rebuilt, New York State is doing well. However we can do that through economics and making sure it's coming back home to us is huge, especially when it involves taxpayer money. Taxpayer money should not be leaving state boundaries. It should be staying in New York and rebuilding the economy. I want to make sure we're investing in infrastructure. We're investing in green energy. I think New York State has the opportunity to be the home of the green industrial revolution, to be the home of research and development for green energy. It's going to be the biggest new market in the entire world. It is happening, and it's going to happen in New York. And I want those jobs to come here. I want those high paying, hopefully unionized. I want to make sure I'm working within the state to make sure labor rights are expanded, to make sure they're getting their fair share. That CEO who's making 271 times more than the average worker, it ain't going to be that way anymore. Workers are going to have the power to bargain, to work for their rights, and to get the things that they earned. Labor, I know you said capital and labor is mobile. Labor is getting left way behind while capital is skyrocketing. The ultra wealthy have made more during this pandemic than anyone. They've doubled, tripled, quadrupled their profits, while American workers are like, I can't afford to get a COVID test because if I get sick, I got to go to the hospital. And again, we can tie it back to healthcare. It's all interconnected. The working class, especially in New York, is being left behind. I want to make sure when we make these investments, it's staying within our borders. New York workers need the help. We need to build them up, and we need to make sure the work is being done in an ethical manner that empowers them.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
We've long supported trying to buy local, work local, and especially now more than ever in the COVID environment. So no disagreement from me there, Lisa. What we need to do is start lifting responsibly lifting these restrictions and stop living in fear of COVID so we can get people back to work. We need to build infrastructure is a very good method of putting people back to work because of the multiplier effect of the dollars spent through the rest of the economy. So, we're trying to get, we want to get 347 done, continue the Route 347 project, get that, out through the rest of the 8th Assembly District. Other projects, you look at the new Tappan Zee Bridge, the Cuomo Bridge, the Kosciuszko Bridge. We've been doing infrastructure projects here on Long Island and around the state. So I think we're going to have to do more. And that is a very good way of getting people back to work. We're investing in a new marine sciences lab in the old Kings Park Psychiatric Center. That's going to go a long way of keeping our building trades and their ancillary support workers, support jobs going as well.
Mr. Rice, a rebuttal on that?
Just to expand, it's just saying furthermore that we do have this potential, and it kind of ties into COVID as well. Obviously, we're talking about recovery, getting these jobs back in, making sure that we build up the middle class. It does take an investment. The state has to be smart. It has to know where to prioritize, where these jobs could fit in, where we can prioritize research and development, manufacturing. We have the ability to rebuild this economy for the middle class. Everything has been outsourced. There's no, we can't bring back coal. I know there's some people who still think this stuff's coming back. We got to be forward looking. We got to look to the future and know that these jobs we're going to provide are going to be high paying. They're going to be quality, and New Yorkers are going to get back to work. And folks like me are going to be able to stay because we're not going to have to rush down to somewhere where we can afford to live because, again, the burden's on us. where we're going to get jobs that can let us stay here. We can let us grow our communities, our state, our cities and towns. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? I just,
Same question.
I had a message I had to respond to. I'm sorry.
It was on the same topic.
Yeah, no, if you have another 30 seconds or a minute of comment.
Look, getting people back to work. We need to create prosperity, and again, infrastructure is one of the best ways to get the most dollars into the most pockets.
Okay, thank you. Now you get the next question, Mr. Fitzpatrick. The fiscal condition of New York State has left individuals with disabilities in jeopardy of loss of services, reduced housing subsidies, etc. How would you plan to support the individuals with disabilities community in such a time that exists when our state government has offered so little or no support?
I wouldn't say the state has offered little or no support. I mean, one of the things we've been fighting for in the disability community, and I've long been an advocate for them, dating back to my days on the town council when we, offered full support to the group homes after Willowbrook way back in the early 70s. And one of the problems we have, and this is, when they raised the minimum wage a few years ago, one of the industries that got hurt very, very badly was the direct care industry to our disabled citizens. And you had people who were working in these facilities would leave to go work at McDonald's because they could now make $13, $14, almost up to $15 an hour. That has put that has created a very real problem for the nonprofits in terms of fundraising. And especially now, that's going to be even more difficult. We were successful in getting a small increase in their pay in the last budget. We still need to do more there. But I think what we have to do in this environment, it's going to be make no mistake, it is going to be very, very difficult in this COVID or post-COVID environment because of the contraction of the economy. And that is to earmark more money in the state budget to this population and make them a higher priority. And that has been, I think, a fair criticism of this governor and this legislative majority, that they have not put the interest of our disabled citizens on a higher plateau.
Okay, Mr. Rice?
Like a lot of issues, it's kind of a game of catch up. It's kind of sad that we're still dealing with a lot of issues within our society that is ableist. It's trying to basically get us to where we should have been. It's 2020. It's to me, it's a little sad. A lot of these issues are still problems. We have the ability to resolve it. We have the ability to address it. We have the technology to do it, and we have the money to do it. We just got to get it in the right hands. And that does mean making sure COVID, again, Mr. Fitzpatrick highlighted it. It really did help exacerbate a lot of these issues. It dragged them out in the spotlight and said, this is how bad something is right now. COVID highlighted it. It was there before COVID. We need to make sure those type of, especially if we're talking disabled citizens in New York State, if they're hurting more than anyone else during COVID, we've completely failed in our responsibility protecting those who need the help the most. We need to make sure they are a priority. The work being done in the next legislature addresses these issues, and that it can't be an afterthought. It can't be on the peripheral. It has to be addressed directly. And that means actually providing the support needed. And in the case of even pay, it's insanity that this is a problem, especially with keeping people in public work. If the pay ain't there, they're not going to stay. If I can make money somewhere else, I'm going to go somewhere else. We got to make sure everybody's square and whole. We got to make sure people are getting paid for the labor that they do, the work that they do. It has to be fair, and it has to let people do the work. And I'm going to assume, I'm hoping the folks that work in the industry wanted to work in that industry. They wanted to do that work. The fact that they had to go somewhere else because better pay, that's insanity. They have to be adequately compensated. They have to be compensated in the way that they should be for the work that they do. That's a direct way to handle something, even with shifting of resources. We have to make sure that nothing is put to the side, nothing is treated as a secondary issue.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, any further comment?
Oh, yeah. It's very easy to say what Dylan says, but it's getting that money is very, very difficult. You have so many demands. You would think $178 billion budget would there should be plenty of extra money for this need or that need. It's simply not true. All of that money is encumbered. The lobbying is intense. And this year, before COVID, the lobbying was extremely intense because we knew going into the budget, we were down, $6 to $7 billion in the hole. So the stakeholders were very, very active. And the problem is you have some very powerful interest groups that, by virtue of their size and strength, take more resources than they need and sometimes more than what they deserve, and they leave other groups hanging. And I've said this many times to the disabled organizations that come and lobby. I said, if this budgetary process were based on merit, you would be first in line. But it's not based on merit. It's unfortunately based a lot on politics. And you have very strong interest groups, and I won't, I could easily mention them because they take more than they need, because the strength of their contractual provisions are growing at a rate we can't keep up with. Our tax base isn't growing fast enough to keep up with some of the contractual arrangements. Pension costs are going up roughly 2% as a percentage of payroll this year on some very, very high salaries. And we see every year more and more pensioners are coming out of the public sector with $100,000, $200,000, and $300,000 pensions, which is unsustainable, and it's hurting people like the folks in the disability community who are scrapping to pay their workers. It's a very sad situation. I've been trying to change it for years, but the politics is very difficult.
Okay, Mr. Rice, wait 1 minute. Linda, was that 1 minute or 2? Because Mike, I thought you had spoken more. That's why I just wanted
That's
to
fine.
be clear to Mr. Rice too. Linda?
Do what's fair.
I was muted. We just hit 2.
Oh, okay. So Mr. Rice, you can go a little longer on your rebuttal then too.
Okay, if I end short, no issue.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I know we're talking about funding, and Mr. Fitzpatrick's 100% right. We can make all these demands, but what about the money? That's key. What I'm talking about is getting the money, as in taxing the people who have not been taxed appropriately, the ones who have skirted every single regulation possible, the ones who've avoided, the ones that hoard wealth, who don't spend it on the economy. We got to make sure we get that to help the folks out who will, especially in cases like the disabled community. The fact that they get left behind because we're not able to get that funding, we're not able to prioritize correctly, is horrific. That means Albany has failed in its job, and we need new representation in there to make sure these are prioritized, to make sure they're actually getting the needs and the help that they need. They need to be prioritized. And we can't just talk about cutting. We can't just talk about hurting the middle class, attacking pensions, removing the things that just barely help balance out the imbalance between capital and labor. I mentioned 271 times the amount the average worker makes is what the CEO makes. We can't attack laborers, we can't attack workers. We have to attack the folks who are purposely rigging the system to benefit them. The folks who have no qualms with what's going on in COVID because they have made millions and billions of dollars while we're all suffering to get by. They're the ones who, if they were actually taxed appropriately, if they were paying their fair share, a lot of these issues would go away because we'd have the funds to address them. We'd have the funds to balance our budget. We'd have the funds to really tackle these issues head on. It is about money, 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 always and forever.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rice, this next one starts with you. Nearly 50,000 children on Long Island are newly living in or near poverty because of job issues related to the pandemic, and they need support for housing, food, health insurance, and remote learning. How would you plan to address this escalating child poverty?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the economic fallout of COVID, I lost my job because of it. I lost my job, and I've been getting by on unemployment. I mean, I have this. I mean, I'm running for office, but like, I'm trying to get on my own. I'm trying to get by. And the fact that we have kids impoverished in the greatest country in the world, self-reported, is an embarrassment. Again, this is about money. It's about who's paying and who's not. These type of services, like we're threatening to cut Medicaid, we're threatening to cut the things that make sure people are not in these positions. Those are the things on the chopping block right now. Those are the things that politicians are going, we can get rid of that. We can cut that. We need to make sure that there is no child that is threatened by homelessness, that is threatened by lack of food security. It's an embarrassment. And we really do need to make sure, again, it all ties back into this. It's a sad fact, but everything ties back into this one critical issue. The burden of the economy and of taxes have been placed on working class and middle class families. We're the ones that are dealing with these issues. If somebody lost their job in COVID and now their kid is threatened with food insecurity, That's a direct result of an economy that was built to keep the rich rich and to keep the middle class and working class people struggling. That's how we address these type of issues. If this was fixed right now, we could address it. We can make sure that there was adequate housing. We can make sure that these people are not going, they're not going hungry. They're not, for lack of better resources, not getting any of this stuff. It's all tied back into the economy. It's all tied back into the laws and who they protect. We need to make sure they're getting the help they need, because we have failed entirely if one kid is threatened with homelessness, if one kid is threatened with food insecurity.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Well, it is disturbing that these numbers are increasing since COVID. All the more reason to get our economy back up and running. I'm hopeful the vaccine comes out as soon as possible. They're, making great strides in getting this done. We need to get, one thing that would be helpful is if we could get the children back into school 5 days a week so their parents could get back to their jobs. There's no excuse for not having full 5-day instruction for our young students. It's unacceptable. Your private schools, your Catholic schools. My wife is a school secretary at a Catholic school for 25 years. They're up and running. 5-day instruction. Kids are in the classroom. They're following all the protocols. Why can't we do that in the public schools? We need to do that. I think that, I think we're dragging our feet, and I think the politics of 2020 and the presidential race is a big part of that problem, because we have a coordinated effort by some of the big teachers unions in these states to drag their feet. It's very disturbing, and so some of this is self-inflicted, in my opinion. And if we could get beyond the fog of 2020 politics, I think we'd be in much better shape. But we have two outstanding food banks in the 8th Assembly District that are bursting at the seams with food. People who need food are getting that food through all of our, not only the regional food banks, but through parish outreach and other organizations, the Smithtown Community Food Bank. People who are in need, can get their needs met. These folks are doing wonderful work, but getting the economy back up and running is the best way to get these children, in better shape.
Okay, Mr. Rice.
Yeah, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you got folks who are like, I got to send my kid to school so I can go to work, potentially 2 to 3 jobs to make sure that I'm able to provide for them. But there's also the risk of these kids getting sick, exploding COVID cases again, and bringing that back home and threatening the health of their families. That's where we're at in America, a rock and a hard place of, do I send my kid to school so I can work, or do I let them go to school, get sick, and then I can't even work? Horrible condition we're in. And this again ties all back into the economy. The fact that we have people that are parents working 2 to 3 jobs to put food on the table right now is economic inequality. The fact that we're willing to risk the health and lives of students and their families because there's no other opportunity. We can't even have them at home to correctly do it because no one's able to stay home. Economic inequality, wealth hoarding, it all ties back into it. I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but it really is the thing that it all ties back to. It's all highlighted by COVID. It was there before COVID, but COVID has made it abundantly clear how deep these issues run. We need to make sure that, especially because again, we dropped the ball in the first place. We're kind of getting our stuff back together, but we're right near a second wave. If that goes up and we're not able to contain it, we're going to be in a much, much worse place than we are right now discussing this.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, a comment?
No, we keep hearing about following the science. Well, Dylan, if we follow the science, we know that young children are at very, very low risk. So there's no reason why we're not allowing these children to go back to school, especially in the younger grades, so that their parents can get back into the economy and we can get the economy up and running again. We know a lot more today than we did 7-8 months ago when we first started. So there's really no excuse for dragging our feet in this area. And again, the most important thing we can do is get the kids back into school full time so that we can get this economy up and running again.
Okay. We do have a lot more questions, but I only have time for one more, and then we'll go after that to the closing statements. So Mr. Fitzpatrick, on this question, what if you're reelected, what measures would you support to improve the quality of the water surrounding our island and our drinking water? What's the state's role in this?
Well, the water quality issue is very important. I know way back in Smithtown, we undertook an effort to divert road runoff away from the sewer system, which ends up in the river and the water supply. The water quality issue, the county has just passed a law. New construction is going to require basically a small D-night system at an additional cost per house, roughly $20,000. We're not using certain pesticides. We've banned certain pesticides that go into the water supply. We've encouraged all sorts of better management techniques on public lands. So there's virtual unanimity, Lisa, with regard to protecting our water supply. We live above our aquifer. Without potable water, this area is doomed. I think, they're addressing the Grum and Plume as well. I know the governor, we had a big presser in Nassau last year to announce a program to clean that water, detoxify it, and send it out, into the ocean so that it doesn't go into the aquifer. So I think the state DEC and frankly the governor, I compliment him on this effort. Steve Ballone has done well, but also the towns have risen to the challenge too to meet the road runoff situation as well. Reducing the amount of nitrates that go into the water supply as well, fertilizers, things like that. So, I think the state has done, I think a good job. The county and the towns have done a good job at not only raising awareness, but enacting policies to encourage people to pay very close attention to this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rice.
The state's responsibility in this specific issue is making sure that the citizens that pay the taxes are being protected. Companies really are the ones that are trying to sneak around any type of regulation to make sure they can get as much profit for what they do. New York State has an obligation to make sure that any type of construction, any type of infrastructure that's built, anything is taking into mind two things. One, the health of the citizens that they are going to be affected by, including water quality, things like that, runoff, pollution, and also the effects of climate change. Mr. Fitzpatrick voted against a bill that basically showed you have to show what the potential effects of climate change might have on this infrastructure before we approve the spending. We talk a lot about fiscal conservatism, but if we build something without taking that into consideration, we might have to redo the entire thing 10 years down the line because climate change is a real and existential threat specifically to Long Island due to our position with the coast. When we talk about the state's role, again, we need to make sure that if this stuff is going on, if growth is going on, it's done in a way that protects the public health. The issue with Grumman, of course, is that that's the only water source Long Island has. We are based with aquifers. That's how we get our water. If that's contaminated, we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble with people's health. It's going to take a long time to clean up. And most importantly, we got to hold those folks accountable. They put the lives of other people at risk. They put the lives of Long Islanders at risk when they did that. We need to make sure that they pay for that. We get the funds needed to also help address it. We can't play handsy-pansy with this type of stuff. We have to be really direct on it. We have to make sure the health of everyone's put first and foremost. And there's ways to do that to both encourage growth and expand on this stuff. And again, it ties back into the infrastructure, making sure that Long Island and New York is the home of green energy, research and development. It all ties back together. We need to be much more forward thinking in our policy and make sure the health of our constituents is placed first.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, any other comment on that?
Well, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA, is a very comprehensive and a very far-reaching piece of legislation that covers all of those issues. The bill that my opponent brings up that I voted against would have frankly been created a gross overreach of government power over all development projects. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. SECRA does the job very, very well. In fact, there's plenty of criticism of SECRA that it delays things, but it's the law of the land, and frankly, it does work reasonably well. So you have to be careful that you are not, violating people's private property rights. People have a right to develop their property. SECRA was installed to make sure that all of those concerns are met. And in my opinion, there's, the far left wing of the Democratic Party is always jumps at the chance to exert or implement more government control over people's lives. And I will always reject that.
Okay, Mr. Rice.
Just on that topic, the bill dealt with specifically climate change. I think what you're referring to is mostly about pollution and contamination.
Yeah.
Climate change is a little bit more existential. It's a little bit larger, all encompassing. Superstorm Sandy is going to look like peanuts if we don't address climate change and take that into consideration. Long Island's at threat immensely due to climate change, specifically because of our, again, proximity to the coast and New York, just in general, New York's placement within the United States. Climate change is going to impact us tremendously. We're already at a point where we kind of missed the spot where we could have really stopped it. Now we're dealing with the after effects of that. When we're building this stuff, when we're developing this stuff, we have to take into consideration what climate change could do to it, because if we don't, not only is it going to be extremely costly, it might have detrimental effects on the communities that they serve. We need to take this stuff very seriously. Voting against considering the effects of climate change on any further developments, to me, is not forward thinking. That's denying the fact that is right in front of our faces.
Okay. So we have time for 2 minutes from each of you for your closing statement. And Mr. Rice, you go first.
I'll sum up my case in a simple way. I'm here to bring bread and butter wins to the people of my district. I'm there to make sure that New York City is not dictating the terms for themselves, that the tax money we're sending up to Albany comes back to us. The voice that Mr. Fitzpatrick is going to tout, the conservative voice in a very democratic assembly, his own caucus votes for them or votes against him a lot of the time. They see him as a little bit too far right. They see him as a little bit regressive. The Republicans are able to go, that's common sense. I'm going to vote on that. Mr. Fitzpatrick has shown that that's not always the case. Whether it be a bill that would extend the statute of limitations for child sex victims to seek justice, he voted against that. Whether it be providing that people convicted of domestic abuse are not able to buy guns, he voted against that. That's not common sense policy. That's not bread and butter wins for the district. That's ideology. That's focusing on trying to be the most conservative, the most consistent ideologically. My ideology is I'm from District 8. I'm representing District 8. I'm middle class and working class. I worked my entire life since I was 16 years old. And I'm happy to be running as a first-time candidate because I don't want that stench of politics, entrenched Albany politics on me. I'm there to represent you. I'm there to fight for you in Albany. I'm there to make sure your pocket's full, not the people who donate to my campaign. I'm there to make sure that I'm fighting for every issue you want to bring up, not the ones that they say will keep you in office. If I get all this done and I make sure my district did better, that's all that matters to me. That's all I want. And that's why I decided to run for office.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick, 2 minutes, your close.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks again to the League for hosting this exchange. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, what we heard tonight is a clear difference between Dylan Rice and Mike Fitzpatrick. I have spent my entire career working for the people of the town of Smithtown and the Hauppauge, the Islip portion of Hauppauge. Yes, I am a conservative, and I am very proud to say I'm a conservative. And it's a shame Mr. Rice isn't afraid, he seems to be afraid to say I'm a proud socialist because he's endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, the party of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who believes the world's going to come to an end in 12 years if we don't allow the government to take total control of our lives. I don't agree with that, and I think it's a lot of hogwash. The world is not falling apart, and we're doing, I think, a lot of good things to try and address some of the challenges ahead. But my first and foremost interest is protecting the middle class and the taxpayers of Long Island and New York State. Because of Democratic Party control in the governor's office, in the state Senate, and in the state assembly, New York is losing population, it is losing wealth, it is losing people, young and middle-aged and old. That has to change. And you don't do that by electing a young socialist to the New York State legislature, who is going to fall right in line with the radical left of the Democratic Party. In the party primaries that we just had in September, 5 more members of the Democratic Socialists of America were elected to the assembly. This New York State legislature is moving dangerously far to the left because of the influence of New York City. I stand as a bulwark against what these people stand for. They want control of your life. Vote Republican. Don't let that happen.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for a robust exchange of quite disparate ideas on many subjects. That's the important thing, so that people who watch this recording will be able to know what the differences are as they vote.
Indeed.
We're reminding everyone, whether it's absentee ballot, which you can mail and you can drop off at the Board of Elections, you can bring them or have someone bring them in their double sealed envelope to early voting sites over 9 days, or even to any polling place on election day. We look forward to everyone knowing more about the candidates, and we also encourage people to go to vote411.org to find out about all the things that are on the ballot. So on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Smithtown and Brookhaven, we appreciate your time and we wish you both well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Thank you, Lee.